I was recently thinking about my time in college where I first encountered someone whom I would consider arrogant. And it was through our relationship that I truly came to understand the difference between confidence and arrogance. Confidence being something that's rooted in merit. Provided past experiences and outcomes, I can expect that in the future I'll be able to deliver the same results. Arrogance, on the other hand, as Webster puts it, is an attitude of superiority, something that may not even be rooted in merit, but a feeling that your way is the best way and there are no other alternatives. So I hope that the story that I'm about to share with you helps you better understand the difference and also know who to avoid and who not to become. So stay tuned. So one semester, I was enrolled in a course called Executive Communications, which was basically speech on steroids. And the goal of that class, among other things, was to ensure that we had the communicative ability to deliver well-crafted messages to stakeholders, shareholders, internal personnel, whomever we needed to speak to help move the company forward, right? Ensuring that we had that executive presence down. And during this class, I often sat next to an individual who, for the sake of this video, we'll call Sean. And Sean was a tall individual, well-dressed, not much for words, very to the point, always had his eyes trained on the professor. Someone who, when they walked into a room, you couldn't help but to feel their presence, right? Someone who you just marveled at a little bit, right? And I sat right next to him, so I had the best view in town, right? But just someone who had that executive presence down packed, didn't even need the class for it. So during one of the earlier weeks where the professor was just throwing themes at us to give a speech about, I took notice to the fact that Sean gave a speech without any notes. And as impressive as that was, when he came back to his seat, I said, "Hey, Sean, great job on that speech. Have you ever thought about maybe creating some notes for yourself when you go up? Again, nothing crazy, but just little bullets on what you want to transition to with each point." And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, thanks, I'm okay, man." And I said, all right, I was going to push the issue. He did a decent job, so that was that. A couple weeks down, we had to give another speech. And again, he continued without the notes up until that point. And when he gave this particular speech, he fumbled a bit during it. And you can kind of see him catch his words, and it looked disorganized, right? It almost looked in that moment like he was making something up. And it just didn't telegraph well. And I think he felt that. So when he came back to his seat, I said, "Hey, remember, I think we talked about this in the beginning of class, but I really think some notes can suit you well." And this wasn't just my advice, it was the advice of the professor, right? Have some notes with you, just little bullets. He didn't go with it. So during the last class, right, and this was the big one, and I don't think he was doing terribly bad in the class, I think he was doing okay, but during the last class, the professor surprised us and brought in a couple of his former students as well as some faculty to watch us give our big speech, right? And this speech, I think, was supposed to be 10 minutes, maybe a little bit more. So it was a considerable amount of time up there. And, I went up, did what I had to do. Other students did the same. And it was Sean's turn. And again, he went up with what? No notes. But again, the professor surprises with these guests. And if you are someone that gives speeches often, then you kind of get used to the audience, right? If you get the same audience all the time, it's like family. It doesn't do anything to you to get up there and just start talking. But when someone brings other people in, that can really shake you up. So this surprise really looked to shake Sean up. So when he went up to give his speech, he started off strong, as he usually does. But then he developed something that I've experienced. I've been there a couple times. He developed cotton mouth, where basically like his mouth dried up. He started to jumble over his words, and he forgot his train of thought. And to his credit, he was able to kind of pause for a minute, refocus, and then kind of went into a quick close. But it looked very inorganic. And I think I'm not jumping to the gun to say that really cost him in terms of his final grade. A lot was weighing on that speech. And again, it made me think about those past attempts when I would speak to him and say, "Hey, you should bring some notes up there." And he would always brush me to the side. when the professor would do the same, he would brush his advice to the side, right? People in there were trying to help each other because we all knew the paranoia that comes with getting in front of people and giving speeches, but for some reason, Sean thought that his way was the best way and the only way. You know, in thinking about that experience, one of my biggest takeaways was just how much arrogance can undermine your ability to stay competitive. How arrogance can undermine your ability to stay competitive. Think about Sean. He was someone that obviously had somewhat of a natural talent to be able to get up there and give a speech without any notes. I admired that. But I think that by the second time when he fumbled a bit on his words, it should have been time for him to think about, hey, how can I tighten up, right? And include some different strategies and tactics to ensure that I'm able to deliver every single time, right? Not at my advice, forget my advice, I was just a peer, but at the advice of the professor. But instead of taking some notes up, and he wasn't getting docked for it, he decided to just go about things his way. Whereas a confident person would have said, you know what, I want to remain on top of my game. And if people are here to give me free advice or free game, I'm going to take it and run with it. But again, he wasn't of that mindset, and it cost him, I'm sure, an A. And in this video, I want to be clear, I'm not making a morality argument. A lot of people like to bucket good people, in the confidence bucket and bad people in the arrogance bucket. I'm not here to do that. What I am here to do is speak to the strategic imperative. So if I'm someone that prides myself on giving speeches, I'm going to pay attention to what other people are doing to refine their game, right? Because that one little change that they can make can be the one thing that bumps me out of my number one spot. And that really is how arrogance can undermine your ability to stay competitive. You're so bought into one way that the fast follower who's just doing something a little bit different can catch you by surprise. So as you navigate your own personal and professional journey, be wary of arrogance in your circle, in your own personality makeup. Understand how it can undermine your ability to stay competitive, right? Think about Sean. Understand that constructive criticism and feedback can be great things for you along your way. Doesn't mean you have to follow all of it, but it's something to keep an ear out for, right? Particularly when you have the right messenger, because oftentimes by following the right constructive criticism, the right feedback, you can help yourself in avoiding the costs that the person who came away with that lesson had to pay. So that's my lesson for you for today, and best of luck as you go about your journey.